Welcome to Talk Commerce, where we explore how merchants, agencies, and developers experience commerce and the communities they work and live in. This week we interview Yoav Kutner, the co-founder of Varien, Magento, Akeneo, MageCore, and Oro Commerce. Not to name a few. What didn't he found? Wow. Well, I found him today on our podcast. He is also a member of the Forbes Technology Council. We talk a little bit about the early history of Magento, but don't worry, we go right into Oro and the Oro Business Application Program that he developed. The BAP that Yoav helped develop is the foundation for many of the solutions on the market today. These include Oro CRM and Akeneo. We talk about Oro Commerce and why it makes sense for a B2B company to use it straight out of the box. Yoav gives us some insight into his thinking on self-serve platforms and how to reduce any resistance to the B2B buying journey. We discuss how different the journey is for B2B, and Yoav gives us 3 of his driving factors that helps Oro deliver great results. This is an episode that must be shared with all your friends and family. Even your grandparents are going to love this show. Today's informational humor: building a website is like baking brownies. They're best when there's a great GUI. That's spelled GUI. The Talk Commerce podcast is sponsored by SwiftOtter. E-commerce developers solve problems daily. In fact, some of those seem like mountainous hurdles that must be climbed in a matter of hours. Stress levels can go through the roof. No wonder the plague of burnout affects developers too. But there's a vaccine for that. Investing time in your career will take you farther than you ever imagined. Meet SwiftOtter. SwiftOtter exists to help you become the e-commerce hero that is indispensable and irreplaceable at your company. We do this through Magento certification study materials and Joseph Maxwell's most recent book, The Art of E-commerce Debugging. Go to swiftotter.com to learn more about how you can quickly climb the ranks in your quest to be a better developer. While you're there, use the coupon code TALKCommerce for 15% off any digital goods at swiftotter.com. Cloud is a new normal for companies of any size. Buying, maintaining, upgrading, and disposing of machines is expensive and complicated. Amazon Web Services, managed by Corp, offers an easy-to-use, flexible, cost-effective solution to all your infrastructure needs. Corp can provide a secure, reliable, scalable, high-performance network that will make your office hum. Not literally. Corp has saved its customers an average of 31% on their IT costs while adding 62% to the bottom line efficiency. To top that, their customers have seen 43% fewer security incidents. Go to ewaycorp.com to learn how you can start saving money and headaches by moving to the cloud. That's ewaycorp.com. My name is Brent Peterson, and I'm your host. Please remember to subscribe wherever you download your podcasts. And now, Talk Commerce. Welcome to this special Oro Commerce episode of Talk Commerce. Today I have Yoav Kutner today from Oro. Yoav is the co-founder of Magento and the co-founder of Oro. Yoav, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us maybe one of your passions in life?
Oh, my passion in life, well, developing code that I don't get to do much anymore for many years, but that was definitely one of my biggest passions. I think if I have to put it into more perspective of what I actually do and am passionate about is building products and kind of building the vision of a product, kind of designing the architecture of it, the feature set, building the roadmap. I really love that, and really building solutions that I can see companies using to solve problems that they have and digitizing their processes and stuff like that. I know it's a dorky one, but that's definitely my passion. So almost second to, first, my second passion will be guitar playing, but I'm even worse at that than I am at building products.
Yeah, and we've learned that your band is going to be very popular and maybe selling out some stadium events. So we'll get.
Yeah, I just need to reform the band. We did a reunion after 25 years, but yeah, we definitely need to reform the band, and that's the goal by age 50 to have a world tour.
All right, excellent. All right, well, let's kind of start off with some history. You were the co-founder of Magento, the CTO for Magento, and I really embrace what you said about finding solutions. Magento, in its early stages, was found to be a great solution for a lot of people. Maybe you could speak to kind of where the Varien came from and how that got started, and then we'll move into Oro Commerce.
Sure, absolutely. So me and Roy, we met at UCLA. Well, we both attending UCLA, and we started it was called iRuben when I met him. He had his own company, kind of a one-man show. I joined him, and we kind of renamed it Varien. We did a barter with a marketing slash PR person slash brand, and they came up with this name. But what we started focusing, we were actually doing any custom web development. Basically, Roy was selling, I was developing. We started hiring more and more developers. And this was 2004. So as we started from building custom websites and what we used to call dynamic websites and data-driven websites, we started seeing that e-commerce was taking more and more of our customers. We selected a solution called OS Commerce. I think that's already sold, that a lot of the new developers don't even know the solution, but that was the #1 open source e-commerce kind of platform on the market. And we started using that more and more to the point where we really built very complex multi-website solutions. We built POS systems on top of it. We had like and point of sale. We had kiosks for traveling, events and stuff like that, all built on top of this. And we started building a robust backend system to kind of manage all these features that we were building in OS Commerce. But it was definitely outgrowing the technology that we were based on, meaning that we had too much debt. That community was not growing, was not really developing much in terms of the roadmap or improving the product. So like many other companies, we actually ended up forking it really badly, meaning that we were responsible for it already. And one of the big things we did, again, is a very old story. We separated the view from the control. We created a Smarty template system for that, right? We did a lot of these work that were not backwards compatible for sure. Not the backwards compatibility was actually even a possibility with OS Commerce. But basically, we really had our fork of OS Commerce that we were offering our customers, to the point where around 2006, we started really growing. We started hiring really, really good developers. We started expanding to Ukraine, where we found really a great pool of developers that were able to do really good work. And that built our confidence to the point where we said, look, we either stay with what we have right now and continue investing in it and fixing it, or we start from scratch, either finding a new platform or building one for our customers. And we really looked around, couldn't find too much on the market at that time that was kind of suitable for everything. So we really looked at building our own. And at this one pivotal moment, I guess, in 2006, I walked into Roy's office and I said, Roy, what about if we release it as open source? What's the worst that can happen? And literally that was the term that we used. And when I said that, he said, yeah, let's do it. What can go wrong, right? And this was right before we started. We spent most of the first half of 2007 just building out the solution, scrapping a lot of what we were doing, and basically from May till kind of August of 2007, when we released the first, I think, beta of Magento, we really did this, and it was a very small team. It was a team of about 4 people and myself, so 4 developers and myself building the product. We were doing it all over chatting on Skype, and we promised Roy that we can do our day-to-day job while doing this. So we gave about 8 hours of billable work and then 12 hours of building Magento after hours and weekends. And that's how we were doing it. And that's kind of the technology product side of it. I think what we also have to share and give credit, of course, to this is that Roy did an amazing job of communicating what we were doing, kind of documenting it. And this is kind of still early days. So he was doing a vlog before it was called a vlog, and we had a great blog about e-commerce. So we used that to start highlighting what we were building with Magento, and that formed a community around what we were doing. So we had about 50,000 followers on the blog for the e-commerce. And then when we started launching Magento, that grew to anywhere like, I think it was about 200,000 people already following what we were doing before we released the line of code, to be honest. And that just pushed the product out. Roy was doing an amazing job communicating it, marketing it. We were getting feedback what people need, so we were not guessing like what features we actually are going to invest in and release with the first version. And when it came out, we were just blown away by the response that we got. And we were definitely not ready for this. Again, we were a services company, just building it for our own customers. And like almost overnight, we had to change our kind of vision and look at becoming a product company and building this for a community and ecosystem that's around that.
Wow, I mean, that's a great story, and I don't know if I've heard it in such detail. Thank you for that. I think one thing you said was we're gonna do this as open source. I kind of grew up in the Microsoft community where I did, first some ASP development, then .NET, and I remember doing shopping carts in the 90s where there was no such thing as open source, and I think Microsoft in its culture was so closed that you wouldn't ever think about doing that. What was in your decision-making process? How did you come up with doing open source? How did you decide, hey, I'm going to share this with everybody? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. For us, it was a non-brainer because we were using open source. Everything that we were building solutions for our customers was open source, and that's from the development language. We selected the PHP, although we were doing different ones in the beginning. But PHP was like taking over. It was accessible. We could find, a snippet of codes, frameworks, libraries very easily. So we started using more and more PHP. And then the solutions themselves. So if it was PHP BB or solutions that people don't know today, but we were using all these open source products to create solutions for our customers. And of course, OS Commerce, right? That was the e-commerce platform that we're using was open source. So again, what I learned from open source is, back then, and I think even feel about it much stronger today. And we can talk about where the future of open source is maybe later, but I think back then, to open source or not to open source, I think the answer was always what can you lose from going open source? And there's all to gain and nothing to lose. And I think that was the approach we had back then. Again, we were not a product company where we already had the license and we would then go back and open source like some companies did, and that caused some of their customers to ask questions, why should we pay you if now you're opening and giving a free version? I think that's not the question. I think the question was what a small company, with we were about 40 people at the time, can achieve if we open source, right? And aside from the contributions, aside from the community, aside from giving the power to have an ecosystem and developers that are contributing, I think one thing that is missed a lot is that allowed us to have organic marketing, right? So when we got acquired by eBay and they asked us, what's your spend on marketing? And we were like, well, we don't even have almost a line item for that, right? Because we don't have traditional marketing spend. But if we look at our open source product, that's our investment in our marketing. That brought us most of our leads, right? Most of our potential customers. And that was our investment. And that was how we were creating the buzz, the brand recognition, the lead generation. Everything was done using and utilizing this ecosystem that was building around our product. So that was our investment. So again, if I look back again, I can argue today if we need to do open source, not open source, there's different things to consider today. But back then, the question for us was a non-brainer. It was like, what can we lose? There's very little we can lose. There's only things we can gain.
Yeah, and I think we saw the great success that you had early on. Let's fast forward then to when you left Magento and you started Oro. You started it as a CRM platform, right? Can you
repeat it, sir?
So you fast forward. Let's fast forward to when you went off. You started Oro. You started with a framework, and that's been used with a number of other platforms. Give us some background on how you arrived at a CRM and then the framework that you created, which then you can correct me, but some of that turned into Akeneo and probably a lot more than we don't know about.
So I think let me just correct you a little bit. So actually, one big decision that we did with Oro versus what we did at Magento was that, and I'll start from the framework level, and then we'll get into your question. Sorry, it's going to be a long answer. So with Magento, we really looked for a framework, and we chose Zen framework at the time. The problem was that Zen framework, if I look back, I would say that that was more of a marketing decision than a product/technology decision that we get our brand out. We were one of the only companies to actually build a real big project on Zen framework at the time. And it really brought us a lot of attention, a lot of developers that were interested to see how to use Zen framework. It was very hyped, and but again, nobody was using it, and we ended up selecting it when it was still in beta. So we paid a lot of price for that. Plus, we had to create a lot of components internally at Magento on our own, for good and for bad, and mostly for bad. Mostly for bad because we were learning and developing things that we could not verify or learn from other people's mistakes. We were doing this on our own. So, for example, the database structure, or the how we were treating blocks and inserting dynamic parts into caching with the ability to cache a page, etc. So we were really inventing stuff for good and for bad. Again, I don't know if that's what we should have been doing. And I think we saw a lot of this in Magento too. Again, this idea of creating a framework rather than using something that's already proven and existing to solve the same problems. Again, if you need to solve a set of problems that is not there, that's a different story. But if you can find something that's already proven and solves your problem, I rather use that because it's proven and you won't hit the same landmines as you would if you do it on your own. So that's what we did with Oro. We looked around, and for us, we did find Symphony and Symphony 2 at that. That was an amazing framework. It had everything we needed. I'll say 98% of what we needed was out of the box. We could use it in the way that they designed it. So we actually didn't have to go and create a framework, right? We really built on top of Symphony. That allowed us to, first of all, tie into their ecosystem already. There are already a bunch of developers that are using it. It allowed us to lower the learning curve because we're using the same solution that more and more platforms are and products are using. So again, developers already know the fundamentals of how to use this framework. They just need to kind of learn the business domain of what the products that we're doing and building are. So that's why we invested in using that. And we took, we had to learn to adjust because from Magento, where we were doing everything we wanted to do the way we wanted it to, we had to kind of learn, right, and spend the time to understand why Symphony doing things the way they do. Can we actually build on top of that using that that way? And the answer is yes. 99.9% we could do anything using how Symphony wants it, even if it's not how we as developers think it should be, or we can do it better. All these slogans that developers come and say. We actually really committed to using Symphony, and that really allowed us to develop much faster, focus on our business domain, and create the products we wanted. And that said, what we started with was the BAP, or the business application platform, called Oro Platform. The idea there was that we are creating a domainless business application, meaning that it doesn't do any work, but it has all the fundamental features that you will need to build a business application. And that means that you'll have your user management, your ACL, menus. You can create entities. You can create attributes. You can create business logic around those entities. And that just to provide you a better starting point to creating your business applications. That's something we saw. Again, we're not guessing. We saw that being tried to be used on Magento, where people were stripping out pieces, decoupling a lot of stuff just to create, for example, a video library management tool or stuff like that, right? And why? We asked them, why are you doing that? That's so, we're so specializing in e-commerce. Why are you doing that? Because we see a lot of features we would need to develop anyway, and you have them. So that's where I started thinking and saying, maybe we really start at the lower point, not binding it directly to e-commerce or to CRM at the time that we were doing, but really creating a more fundamental piece of code that allows companies to take that, and it can be for their own use, for products that they cannot find off the shelf. We know still a lot of businesses need custom development to create applications that they cannot find off the shelf because it's unique to them. But also for other companies that want to build products. And that's where kind of joined forces with Akeneo. I met them really early on. I love those guys. I knew them for years, working with them in the Magento ecosystem. When they pitched to me the idea of Akeneo, I was sold. I knew PIM is a big need on the market, and I liked their approach to it. So I actually co-founded that company with them. with one request that they try to use as much of our platform as possible for developing their product. And they did. So they're using a lot of the components, especially initially, they were using a lot of the components out of our platform. And again, based on their needs and how fast they were developing, they actually added their own components as well. But again, we're based on the same framework, based on the same technology. It looks very, very similar. You can tell that they're kind of built fundamentally in the same product. But again, were able to change the design. They're from France, so they have much better taste than me in making products look good. So definitely, product looks a bit different. They could still make it individual, right, and make it their own. But still, a great company and a great product that they built using some of our components. So at least, we were able to accelerate some of their development in the beginning. Yeah. And then yes, there's other companies, Morello, open source ERP. There's HR Role, it's HR software built on our product, and there's others that are using it, and there's companies that build solutions internally that they're using our platform as a solution.
Yeah, I think a really good comment on using a catalog for something other than just trying to sell things. I'm 100% guilty of using Magento to make a video library because it works fantastic. And it's amazing how many clients overlook or ask another company, hey, can you custom make this video library? And I'll say, well, did you know the product has native video and that there's a category structure and there's a bunch of attributes that you can create and that would turn into a natural video library. You don't have to do anything. That's right. One thing that's always hard to get across. I think merchants and even developers who maybe aren't looking outside the box, or aren't always looking to see what can I do with this without having to do any programming. And I think certainly what you've done on both Magento and now Oro is give the ability to do a lot of these things for non-programmers when you get to the application.
Yeah, that's actually, takes me way back. I think for me, that was an obvious thing that we should do. And again, it's not obvious at all, right? I mean, while we were gaining more and more customers and saw customers that are leaving, older solutions like ATG and Oracle, right? And we learned about their frustrations, right? I mean, Yahoo Stores, another good example, right, of how people used to manage their stores on Yahoo Stores. And but I was so surprised by companies like ATG of like what it takes to create a product page, what it takes to create a new feature, right? That's definitely something that we were different generation. I think we're at that time. I mean, everything expanded from that, but the ability to give more control to the actual user was a big selling point of what we were offering. So I remember the example of, we were sitting at a sales call with one of our biggest customers to date on Magento really early on, and they were asking us, what will it take to add like a YouTube video to a product page? And they said, give us an estimate. Is it going to be like 500 hours, 1,000 hours? What's the estimate for that? And I said, well, you do it right now. And I literally opened, the admin and showed them how we added the video. And they're like, no way, it cannot be that simple, right? So yes, it should and could, and we should keep on remembering, even if we're developers, and I'm not a developer anymore, I won't say but even for developers to remember that the end user is not a developer, right? And we want them to be able to use what they need and to be efficient about it, right? And we have to sometimes put our product and usability glasses on before we develop something we really like.
Yeah. So, and I'm just going to make a comment that once a developer, also always a developer. And, I find myself writing bash scripts on the weekends just to, as a relaxing thing, which is completely silly. And I was never a very good developer. But I do find it relaxing to at least do something other than sales or whatever I do now. So
I have the same thing. To keep my chops and like my abilities, I have a piece of code that I write every weekend just to remind myself. It's 2 lines of code, but it really helps. It's first line is echo, you must write code, and second line is go to the next first line, right? And I keep doing that over and over again just to remind myself I need to write code.
Yeah, exactly. To keep yourself at least in some practice, and honestly, sometimes it's fun. just to do that, to keep yourself involved. And then the next thing is to hear when a new developer says, oh, that's going to be so difficult, we can't do that. I'm sure the first thing you do is say, well, you can already do it without any development. But the next thing you'll say is, that's not as difficult as you think. And I think Oro or your BAP framework gives you that underlying structure that the developers could use to make sure to make those solutions without a lot of extra work.
Right, and focus on the work they need to do versus going to a customer and saying, I have to build for you a user management or an ACL, access control level, or single sign-on every time from scratch. No, you do that time and time again. And as developers, I mean, that's one of the things that developers have. They try to make their work easier, right? If you do something more than twice, you want to automate it, right? And that should be your guiding force for everything. If you're building a software for companies time and time again, and you're doing the same feature, I know everybody will have some piece of code that they're using, right? That brings them 60, 70, 80% of the way. That's how we thought about the BAP. We said, that should be a good starting point that brings you anywhere from 60 to 80% along the way. And you focus on the pieces of code and features that you cannot find off the shelf because they're unique to the business you're working with or solution you're building. So yeah, that was what was guiding us.
And so I know you mentioned Symphony. Do you feel that how it handles data and how it handles compared to Magento 1.3.2.4, which had the old sales structure with the sales tables all through entities? Do you feel as though that gives you less pain when you're moving to higher volumes or higher capacity sites where, the coding in Magento, the older versions of Magento was great, but we all saw that at some volume, it kind of fell down.
Right.
You felt more comfortable now going forward with what you have with the Symphony when you first started that?
So I will say that in terms of performance, again, if I'm putting Magento 2 versus Symphony 2, right, and I look at these two pieces of code, I do see a lot of the struggles that Magento 2 was going through early on. I'm maybe following a bit less right now, but early on there was a lot of issues. And actually, when I was brought by Magento to kind of take a look at and give my perspective of what's going on in Magento 2, I was actually not happy to see that they chose the route of creating everything again on their own. And when I was talking and interviewing the developers, their answer was, I can do it better, trust me. And that's famous last words, right? That's not something you want to hear. And sure enough, that's what happened. Symphony was at it already for about 7 years at that time. So a lot of the performance issues were a non-issue anymore, allowed you to focus on scalability. That said, again, in the use cases that we focus on, we'll always find issues that framework is not there to solve. It gives you the tools to solve it, but it won't solve it for you. I mean, it's still something that we need to kind of focus on and use the tools that we have, but we don't have to worry about fundamentals. That's the key. You won't have an issue with performance because of how you build your entity system, right, or stuff like that, because that's already proven. It's used by thousands or hundreds of thousands of solutions already, and they knew and went through all the pains to get there. Again, it doesn't mean that we'll solve everything, and we had our challenges. I mean, in B2B, and I'm jumping ahead a bit, but in Oro Commerce, in B2B, we have huge catalogs, millions and millions of SKUs with custom pricing. So imagine the permutations of your pricing on top of millions and millions of products. So that is not something the framework should solve for you. That's your solution, and that's your issues, and you have to come up with ways to solve it, make it scalable, make it performant. So I think that, again, you should ask a framework to be fundamentally there for you, perform as described, meaning that, again, this is what you can do with it. But then when it gets to specific issues that you're dealing with, it's your responsibility as a developer to work with those tools to solve them. That makes sense.
So I think today our ultimate goal is to hear about Oro Commerce. But can we kind of just go through all the different products that you've developed through Oro? I think you started with CRM, and then you just kind of walk us through that roadmap of all the exciting things that you've done.
So we started with CRM. The idea was, again, not to guess what the world needs, but to kind of focus on what we know from Magento. And we were very complementary, I think, to the Magento ecosystem at the time. And we really started creating a CRM. Our take on the CRM was, and Oro CRM is the name of the product. Our take on that product was that there was no true what we call multi-channel CRM tool. Most of the CRM tools, even though the name is client relation management, were more geared towards pipeline management, meaning it was a tool for a sales manager to get a view of the sales pipeline and how good the sales team is performing, right? And it's called, it's a very bad word. It's called the productivity tool, right? Which is non-productive at all because it requires the sales team to continuously update data into a third-party system that they don't work in and they have zero value for almost. And that's what we saw, that people that were using CRMs systems at the time were either not using it or they were using it very little, and it was pushed down the throat of everybody. So that putting what we learned at Magento was that there was no good tools for merchants and B2C merchants to have tools that they can interact with their customers, right? And that's where we took on of our CRM to, and we really created this multi-channel CRM that we really put as the central repository of all your customer data. That means that we could connect easily to any data source that you have customer interactions with. That can be, any request forms, any customer service. We were integrated with Zendesk and stuff like that, and really build your e-commerce store, right? Everything like that, and bring it all into one place and create views that a user could create, right? Select what data is important for him. Maybe his manager creates this view for him as well. It depends on how you want to set it up. But the idea is that they see relevant data when they open a customer record. And that can be for B2B, for B2C, for anything. And that means that if you're a salesperson and you're opening it, you see relevant data. For example, even data of how happy this customer is with our support, right? So when you're interacting with them, you get that piece of data because it's important for you. The customer support can see the last order, where it is, where it's stuck, so they can actually be more prepared. So really like building this this place where all the customer data sits, building the views for the specific user in the company. Another point that was missed a lot was marketers. So allowing marketers to use this data to create segments, to create marketing lists, et cetera. So we really thought that's where it should sit. And then we can use whatever system we had built in, but we could use whatever email marketing system to use that. So that's what we created. I went to market with that. It started gaining a lot of traction. Specifically, we targeted, of course, Magento first. I created a really deep integration with Magento, and we started picking up really, really well with this product. Like usual, what happens, we kind of awoke the giants, right? And companies like Salesforce and HubSpot that just went public, and Sugar CRM started using the same marketing, multi-channel CRM, B2C CRM, we can do everything, blah, blah, blah. And it started being very competitive for us, where we started looking at, getting out of the Magento kind of sphere and trying to work with other platforms, et cetera. Just to find, again, it's still considered a productivity tool, meaning that it's something that is always second on the list, right? Coming from e-commerce where we're generating revenue for the company, that's always exciting. When you come to a company and say, I can make you feel better and more productive, okay, yeah, number 2 on the list, absolutely, right? So I started feeling that, it's not growing as fast, it's not as easy to get out of the Magento world with the solution. And I started getting also a lot of requests from our CRM customers that were not necessarily Magento users to create more and more transactional features in the CRM, meaning that, again, if you're already making a salesperson sit in the CRM and update data, might as well have him do the work there as well, right? Or maybe do the work, which is even better, do the work and have the data updated while they're working, rather than having multiple systems to do the same thing. And that bundled with what we saw, that more and more B2B companies were trying to go online and trying to figure out what does it mean to have a digital or B2B e-commerce solution and go through this process. Hand to hand together kind of caused us to create Oro Commerce, which is our B2B e-commerce platform / digital commerce platform. And in a nutshell, when we have a lot of products at Oro, it's a single product, single roadmap. We basically added features to our CRM as bundles. You can turn off completely the CRM if you don't want. You can just use the commerce. You can just use the CRM. It's fully modular, but the idea is that you can combine them and get one solution for both. And we're seeing this a lot. We're seeing that we are either getting CRM customers, and once they understand that they can open a front end, and they don't have to call it even an e-commerce, they can call it a customer portal or front end to the ERP, where they actually have interactions with the customer in a digital way, on a digital platform, self-serve, et cetera. That's what we opened up on top of the CRM. But it could be that they are coming for B2B e-commerce, and then they're figuring out, well, I can have the CRM and tools in the same system. Why do I need Salesforce? Let's cut Salesforce out of this equation. We can have one system going. So we're really seeing that they're kind of helping each other grow. And it's more kind of used, I'll be honest, as a marketing, because it is a single product that we can enable, disable features as needed per our customers. So we can enable just a customer portal, we can enable catalog, we can enable CRM, we can do all this in a single place with a single product. And just to add to that, we also just released and announced our what is it, number 4? If you go BAP, CRM, commerce, and then we have marketplace now as well. So we really are getting more and more customers that are building marketplaces on top of our solution. And again, it's a lot of the same product. Again, we're one of the only solutions for marketplace that has a built-in CRM that is geared towards what you need for marketplace, right? Because we're enabling different sellers to get pieces of again, just building what we had in the CRM, but opening for them data that's relevant for their customers that they're selling to on the marketplace, and they can have a built-in interaction tools with them in CRM, et cetera. So again, we really have this great product that we can kind of pre-configure for a specific use case, but what we learn is they cross-pollinate, right? You have to use some of the features from each one, and that's why we're treating it as a single backlog, single development team that we can kind of push features for a specific side of the product as we need and as we learn that the industry needs. So that's what we're doing today. So sum it up: Oro platform, Oro CRM, Oro Commerce, and Oro Marketplace.
Okay, that's fantastic. And I think marketplace is definitely one of those things that everybody seems to want nowadays. And it's probably because they're sick of paying fees to Amazon, or they see the success that they've had on Amazon and they want to duplicate that success. So maybe we could go over some of the features that Oro Commerce has. And I think that's I had a great conversation with Thomas Fleck about how out of the box it does almost everything that a B2B company would want out of it. Maybe we could discuss some of those features, the ones that you see are really important to a B2B client.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start quickly from the 3 big things we were trying to solve with Oro Commerce, because I think that's important to kind of start focusing on what is B2B commerce, or what is B2B digital commerce, because I think that's very, very wide described today. And I think we really need to start talking about what we can and should be focusing on. I think if we put it into 3 major categories, the first thing is what we call self-serve, meaning that the obvious use case is I'm selling today to consumers. I'm starting to attract companies that want to buy from me. I need to enable companies to buy from my website as a company, not as a consumer. And the big validation that we got for this was Amazon for Business, right? Amazon for Business released this feature where they're allowing companies to sign up to Amazon as companies, right? It's no longer I share my login information with my office buyer for them to use it, and my personal credit card is also there because I buy movies for my kids, right? So it's like you want to have a company as an entity buying on your website. And that is B2B. If you're a business and you're selling to another business, that's B2B. And a lot of people are just not looking at that as something that they need to solve for. And it is, because we cannot continue allowing companies to buy as consumers online, right? So we need to treat them with the specific features that they need. For example, they need to be able to manage users, right? Give so multiple users under a single account with different permissions. I want to have a manager that can manage those users, create them, change their roles, maybe delete them if I fire them, etc. I need to limit what they can buy. I need to give them budgets. I need to give them approval systems, right? If I need to approve a certain order. So all these have to be there. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's not enough to just say, oh, you can have multiple users under a single kind of umbrella. It's not enough. It really goes deep in terms of what you need to build to be able to serve a company when you're selling them online. And I think this is something that is growing. I think some companies are doing it amazingly well. Staples, again, not maybe doing well as a company, but doing well in actually building these solutions for companies to buy online. Costco, right, has business accounts. And I think Amazon today is definitely starting to lead that. So Amazon for Business. So again, if you want today to start selling and being open to companies buying online, you have to start looking at the feature set that you need to have there. And that I call that the self-serve kind of category. The second one is the meat and potatoes that we always talk about or think about when we talk B2B, and this is what we call buyer-seller interaction. We have some buyer that starts doing research. Traditionally, they would go to a conference, a convention. Today, they're doing it online, right? Surprising or not, that's what we all do. So they'll start their research online. And that means you have to be indexable. Your catalog has to be indexable. So when somebody does an online search, they'll find you, right? And that's an elementary feature that you'll be surprised how many businesses miss. But then once they find a company or product that they're interested in, asking for pricing, asking for a quote, asking for RFP, request for proposal, etc. That whole system taking it online, so they don't need to go and start looking for an email or phone number or a contact us form. They want to be actively doing some work. And what we created, for example, is a way for them to do this as you would browse the website to create different quotes, different or requests for quotes, different RFPs that they're working on, and multitask on that. So meaning, again, we have to remember B2B and B2C, different kind of buying habits, right? And we'll talk about that in a bit. But so really creating these kind of features that make them efficient, so they will want to use your website and not go to your competitor to do that. So they have to find all these features. Then once the RFP comes in, allowing the other side, which is again something that a lot of e-commerce platforms are ignoring. There's two sides to the B2B. There's two Bs and there's a B on each side. The sellers, the actual sales team and the sellers to actually respond to that, right? In a single system, not third-party system, not starting to send them emails. Use one system to do that. And return the pricing. And then once the customer is ready to put in the order, of course, take the order, help them to put in the order, update them on the order statuses, et cetera, and then push this order down the pipes if it's managed fully by us or if it goes to the ERP system and accounting systems for billing, et cetera. So this whole process, the buyer-seller interaction is the biggest piece of what we were doing with Oro Commerce. And the last one is where we really call it the marketplaces or B2X. I think they're very similar for us because they're like everything on top of that. So adding features to the B2B, enhancing a lot of these specifically. So we do business to government, we do business to employees, we do business to consumers. So we enabling my reseller model, franchise models, right, on a single system. And the reasons for that is that a lot of times manufacturers determine the pricing, determines what catalog you can actually sell, at what regions, et cetera. So it has to be these systems that are tied together. And that's why we were so better off at solving marketplaces by the analysts, because we really have these tools already for all these other use cases of franchisees, for resellers, et cetera. So we already had all the features. Marketplace was almost a non-brainer for us. It's 90% out of the box for us to create a B2B or a B2C marketplace today. And that put that in the bucket of the B2X, right? So a business needs to sell now to anything. And of course, we solve also for B2B and B2C on the same platform. So a lot of our companies that we work with are primarily B2B, but they still have a channel for B2C. To require them to have another solution just to sell to B2C, which is sometimes 5%, 2% of their revenues, it's too much, right? We want them to have one. So we really have the ability to do B2B and B2C on the same platform. We can do multiple websites on the same platform. I think that's also given. So 3 big categories, if I have to sum it up: self-serve, buyer-seller interactions, and B2X. Those are the 3 things we were solving with Oro Commerce. And like I said, we're marketing separately the marketplace as well. But all these other scenarios. So feature sets, right? You were asking. I told you it's going to be a long answer. In terms of feature set, we had to really kind of, and the reason we, everybody asks us, why didn't you just build it on top of Magento, right? Why wouldn't you, know how great Magento is, why wouldn't you do it on top of Magento? And the reason was that fundamentally we had to build some stuff that from the ground up was too much work. And we did that. I created solutions on Magento for B2B, but I saw how much work we had to do and how much of we were basically forking out of the Magento in order to do that. And that was not a solution for me. So we really had to start from the beginning. One of the biggest ones is, and I kind of alluded to that, it's the catalog sizes that we're encountering in B2B are much, much bigger than what we are used to in B2C. And that means that we had to solve for millions and millions of SKUs. Our biggest customer today has 160 million SKUs on the catalog, and it has to perform. Then adding to that is the pricing engine. In B2B, every customer and every user of a customer, that can be hundreds of users on their single customer account, can have their own individual pricing, and we have to support for that. So that's something very fundamental to scale to that level, to be able to have basically infinite number of pricing that are relevant and are searchable. That's a big one, because still unable to find a search partner. We had to build search because there's no good search for B2B today on the market. I'm giving there a freebie if anybody wants to go and create it, because I'm trying to work with a lot of search companies. Nobody has a solution for B2B today, just because of this indexing of pricing, which is very different. So that will be a big one that we invested a lot in. The multi-org, multi-user, multi-company structure, both on the back end and the front end, meaning that some companies are we do great with big companies that have multiple business units, multiple companies that are under a single holding company. But the same is true for your customers in B2B, right? Because again, the B2B is a reflection of each other. So if you have this problem, your customers have this problem too. So we have to support that as well. So again, we might have to serve resellers from the back end, but then their resellers' customers might be on their own a complex entity. So we have to really scale how we build the customer accounts and all that deeply. Funny enough, we did invest a lot in CMS, to the point where today we have a really good, robust CMS, drag and drop style into the product. Again, we were surprised how much that was needed, because I didn't assume that that would be the case. But again, we're working with B2B companies. A lot of times we're 5 to 10 years behind where B2C is today. And that was a big thing. So we really invested in that. I'll mention it because sometimes I take it for granted, but we really invested in that. And then if I have to kind of really differentiate where we are today, is what we call the workflow engine. This is something we invested a lot, and I can go back to why I did it. I had this idea way back already. I came from a different complete reason. It was for A/B testing. Because I said, okay, how can we actually enable A/B testing that's not just on a content or on placement on a page, right? How do we actually do it for business processes? Which checkout is better, right? And the way I kind of drew it up in my head was a workflow engine, right? That I can determine the steps, I can determine work and transitions and stuff like that. So again, there are BPMs, but BPMs are external that use your API to kind of control what you're doing. I thought there should also be this kind of tool to create workflows directly on your system that you're working on, because that's very important. And that's what we actually built into Oro, and we have a workflow that allows you to configure any process in the system. Any business process in the system is configurable, both backend and frontend, meaning that I can create a workflow for opportunities in the system differently for different business units, or different industries that I'm serving, or different users in the system. They can have a completely different user experience. And that is true for the front end as well. So we can literally create a custom user experience for the specific user that is using the front end as well. And that comes to play a lot in B2B. Again, in B2B, we talked about the mirror, 2Bs, but there's also the role of the bigger B wins, meaning that if I'm the seller and I'm a big company and I'm selling to a lot of small companies, I'll tell them, this is how you work with me, right? And everybody will say, oh, I'm in, let's do that. But if the bigger B is the customer, he'll determine and say, look, if you want me to use your website, this is how it needs to work, right? And we've seen this time and time again in B2B. And to have that flexibility, we were, as developers, what we would go and do is, well, if this customer is that, then, whatever, or else do this for this customer. Doesn't scale, right? That's not the approach that's what we used to do in Magento, unfortunately. That's not the approach in how to customize the checkout. So the workflow even works than the checkout. So we can really deliver a unique customer experience, including the checkout on the front end. And it's key for the B2B implementations and for B2B to be adopted, because if your customers cannot use it, they will not. They will either pick up the phone or go to your competitor. That's the rule in B2B today. So that's why that was like one of the biggest features we invested in. Took a lot of time, but I think we're there now. We can, and with minimal to no coding, we can achieve this. And that's the key to this, and maintain these experiences outside of upgrading your code and stuff like that. So that's where we kind of develop that.
I just want to kind of go back to how traditionally, let me just say from the agency point of view, we don't always think about what the client wants, and the client being the merchant who's going to set up this B2B store. It's not always thought about the customer wants to use that website. And I know that in our pre-talk, we talked a little bit about agencies shoving down a certain solution down somebody's throat because that's the solution they sell.
Right.
And I think Magento was in that box for quite a long time. A lot of it just because of our name, like, we're Magento, so we're going to sell Magento. But I think that it's opening up everybody's eyes, and I appreciate what you said about want to use your website. So maybe we could talk a little bit about how a business or even an agency would approach that, and in thinking about making sure that the client wants to use their website. And I like the workflow engine approach too, because I feel like you can test some of those things to make sure that what they're using is what they like. Because the other thing that's going to happen is, and you said it yourself, that hey, I don't like this, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm just going to go where it's easier, or I'm going to go because this other company has, even if the company's a little bit more expensive, it's easier to use their system. I can get it done and in and out the door, and I don't have to spend all kinds of time trying it.
Right. And a big thing we have to remember in B2B versus B2C, even today, B2C is almost a one-time experience, right? I mean, we're building it kind of thinking that the customer will be in and out once on this checkout. We're trying to build it for the widest range of users possible, right? Lowest common denominator, intuitive, highest average order amount we can get, and see you because we most likely never see you again, right? That is thrown out the window when you talk about B2B. B2B is long-term relationships. Again, we can discuss this in a different call maybe, but in reality today, it is a long-term relationship, meaning that once I find as a buyer, once I find a vendor or a seller that I want to work with, I establish this relationship. It's a painful kind of structure to establish, but once we have it, I will use your services as much as possible. But it's not a given. It's not something you can say, well, it will never change. So as we are going through these transformations, these companies are going from offline, I'll call it, to online. There was a reason why these customers stayed with you for so long. You gave them good pricing, you gave them good support, you gave them good service, you gave them a good customer experience. They were with you for a long time. When we are doing these transitions to digital, which again, we can talk about later why it's a must to do, but it's definitely something that's happening. This actually puts a lot of businesses at risk because now you're making the customer say, well, I cannot pick up the phone and talk about Little League and then put an order in. I have to use this system. Does this system work for me? And I'm going to use it a lot, right? I come there at least once a week, or I come there a few times a day because I have to check up on the order statuses and stuff like that. If I can't do what I need to do intuitively, there will be a competitor that will figure it out and do it better, right? And like you said, sometimes my time is money, and if I can save, maybe I'll spend a few more bucks, but I'll save time and effort, and the system will work better for me. I'll get what I need. My people will actually be more efficient. They can do other things. That's where the play starts coming, right? And that's why we really have to invest in creating the right customer experience. And again, moreover, keeping this bigger B wins mindset in B2B, it's sometimes not even an option. If you cannot provide the features that your customers need in order to work, and I can talk about real life examples, but if you cannot give them the right user experience that they need, they cannot use the system. It's not even a question, right? So you have to custom tailor it to their requirements. Again, like I said, if they're bigger than you, you'll do whatever they ask you to keep them as a customer, because you know there's alternatives, and you'll have to do that. And you can do it easily, or you can do it with a lot of spend and time and money by creating custom code every time they change their minds, right? And those bigger B, believe it or not, they tend to be the ones that are generating the most revenue for you, but also demanding the most, right? It's not surprise or is surprise, but that's how it works. But you can keep them happy. And if they're happy, they'll stay with you for a long time. So we see this initial investment more for bigger customers. but it's worthwhile because once they use it, you're actually saving money. You don't have, we worked with customers that they had a dedicated team to answer their bigger customers, right? And they don't need them anymore to kind of service this customer. This customer can now do 90% of what they do online. They don't need to pick up a phone and talk to somebody, and it's less frustrating, and they don't have to wait and somebody's sick, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They can just work, right? And we automated the billing, we automated the approval process, we did a lot of these things. That creates a much deeper relationship moving forward, right? So whereas before it was Little League, best pricing, good customer experience, today it's the digital experiences goes hand in hand to that. Maybe we lose Little League, but we can have a Little League, swatch or something on the website where people can watch scores. But I'm saying losing some of the personal attention, or as we actually learned, maybe having more of that, because now that you talk, it's just to keep the relationship going. It's not about what's the order status or stuff like that. So you have more time to invest in the relationship aside from the day-to-day mundane kind of work. So that's what we're investing in.
Yeah, and I think it could be both. It could be the user calling in and either putting the order in as they're talking, or even this customer service person or salesperson putting in the order on behalf of the user for them. So it could still be both.
And sometimes even just doing that part. But like I said, we call it, some of our customers don't call it B2B e-commerce. They call it customer portal. Our customers need to see the order status. They need to follow the process. They need to approve it, because it can be like at different steps of the order, they need to approve that step, right? So before, where it was, let's schedule a meeting, let's do that, they can just do it with an email and a click of a button, and then everything is done.
Okay, so first thing I have to say is that we're going to have to do a part 2 because we're almost out of time, and I have so many more questions that I want to ask. But yeah, this went really quick. Let's kind of finish up today, and then let's commit to doing a part 2, because I think there's questions around ROI and differentiations between other platforms, and there's so many things now that are in the B2B space that are unique to B2B. Let's face it, the majority of the other solutions were built B2C, and then they added B2B. I think what I like about Oro Commerce is that you were built B2B, and then you've sort of adopted some things that are B2C, and marketplace is a hot thing, like we've said. So I would like to kind of dive into that a little bit more. And then personalization, specialization. I think that what we talked about earlier is making it so that it doesn't have to be developed, that out of the box, you can use some configurations to make your specializations work for you. And I think what's not often recognized is the client in a B2B setting wants to be able to get that customized experience for them. They'll feel more at home, and you don't get that creepy feeling that you do when you go to a B2C website and like, how do they know that I like that? Or I don't remember giving them that data, even if you might have. I don't remember giving them, and how do they know that I like blue so much, or whatever the thing is, like, right? So the specialization, I think, is also
pink in my case, but
yeah, pink.
As you can see, I wear a lot of pink.
Magenta.
Yeah. I wasn't going to use that word, but yeah.
All right, sorry. Yeah, so let's commit to a part 2 if we could.
Absolutely.
And then I think, as we got a couple of minutes left here, what are you doing to keep up with things? How do you keep up? You mentioned you do some weekend coding. You write 2 lines of code at least. What else are you doing to kind of keep up with the times?
So I do spend time with customers. I join sales calls. I go to conferences. I spend time on the ground talking to the actual people that are intended to use my software. I think that always brings me to the ground of where stuff is really happening. I will say a lot of times reading a lot of the blogs and books, and talking to some of the analysts or technology partners and stuff like that is creating this false view of the world. With B2C, we were running so fast, right? And it keeps running. Maybe a bit slowed down the last couple of years, but I think it was running so fast. We were innovating on a daily basis, right? I think with B2B, what happened was, on my mistake for sure, was that we a little bit overshot the intended audience, which kind of grounded me back to spending a lot of time with customers. So I work on projects. I participate in actual implementations just to kind of learn. I sit on sales calls. I meet with them. I have quarterly meetings with a lot of my customers just to kind of stay in touch and in tune with what they're actually doing and how they're using the product. I think this is my biggest, share that I can say specifically for B2B. Again, I'm not saying it doesn't work for other industries to read what's the cutting edge solution, but actually identifying how the product is used in the real world is key. And I learned that in Magento a lot, but again, in Magento, I really felt like we're leading and people were following, not following like in the terms of that, but they were adopting everything we were creating. So that was great. Sometimes not, but a lot of times, yes. We can talk about another episode maybe about all the unused features of Magento. But this is my number one way of doing keeping up, because again, I really feel that a lot of the publications and writings about B2B today is so disconnected from the truth and reality of what businesses are going through and what they need in order to go through this transformations that they are going through right now.
Yeah, and I'm going to just say one of the biggest ways I've been able to learn and keep up with our clients is doing a quarterly what's working, what's not working. Give them 10, 15 minutes, throw everything on a piece of paper that you can think of, and then go over that and then create some issues about what's not working. And let's work on that not working for the next quarter. And I think that any B2B merchant should be looking at that on their website with their partner, with all their vendors, and making sure that what's not working is being addressed. Because I think what we've all seen is that it's not working because, and that because might be super simple. And sometimes developers tend to over-engineer something, and that's not working because, man, they made this solution that's super complicated, and here's an easier way to do it. And getting some more people in the room to decide on that every quarter, I think, is a great way to go about that.
Yeah, and I think a great example is all the headless PWA, right? We support a lot of it. We have integrations with that, but coming right now to a company that doesn't have an online catalog even, right? They're not at all indexable. And talking to them about PWA and headless, it's an overshot, right? It's like, yeah, let's talk about what they need, which they need to be indexable and searchable and found online, right? How? That they don't really care right now. So sometimes we tend to lead with the wrong terms and the wrong kind of features and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, and on the flip side, the CEO of some company hears PWA and they're like, "We need that," and I'm like, "Well, maybe you don't need it. Let's look at some other things, because it does add some complexity." All right, so as we wrap things up today, why don't you give a shameless plug about something? What do you want to plug today?
Well, I definitely would ask developers to give us a shot, look at what we're doing. I think we are definitely going to surprise a lot of developers that didn't look at what we're doing with everything we were building. Join our community and ecosystem. I think it's something that will open your eyes, again, if nothing else, to just a different approach to solving some of the problems we've been doing for many years together. That would be my biggest plug. And of course, join us and learn about our newest product, which is Oro Marketplace. I think it's going to really open a lot of possibilities for a lot of system integrators and developers that are getting a lot of demand for this now. So those are my two plugs. I think, again, I'm not asking anybody for money or anything at this point. I just want us to kind of work together and I'll have to say this is a quick story. I think we can end with that. I had the humbling experience, right, of going to a conference in Germany and meeting this young, early 20s developer, really talented guy. And he came to our booth and he looked at Oro and he's like, "What is Oro?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, we have Oro Commerce. It's a B2B commerce platform." And he's like, "You have no chance in hell." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You probably don't know, but there's a solution called Magento that's going to kick your ass. It's so good." And again, it's humbling because he didn't know who I am and stuff. So it was a good lesson to hear. He said, and what I want to focus on is that I asked him, "But did you even look at us? Did you even take a look? And maybe we'll surprise you." And his answer is, "No, I didn't." Well, that's what I'm taking. All I'm asking is for people to give us a chance, look at what we've done, and give us feedback so we can learn and do better. So.
Yeah, and I'll just say for myself, I tend to at least install it on my local, and I still have my local running on my computer, believe it or not. And I found the Oro folks on your forum super helpful. Like I started with Oro when it was in beta, running it locally, and I'll admit that I don't have as much time as I had in the past to do some of those things, but the community and the answers that I got to get me to getting a live site in my local, and then I put one up on Amazon and or AWS or whatever, and it wasn't as difficult. It wasn't difficult at all, I should say. And I was able to do it. And if I can do it, anybody can do it.
That's always my approach. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So,
yeah. And so
and again, a lot of the lessons we learned, we're improving from what we learned in Magento. I think one of the biggest one was we have a dedicated team to help the ecosystem and community to get there. So again, I welcome anybody to check it out and just give us feedback to learn back. So.
Yeah, not to scare away any merchants. You don't have to try to do this yourself.
Oh, no,
go
no,
to a partner who's really good at it. Don't come to me. Come to Magento, but don't have me do it on the weekend, because that's what I typically do. But anyways, the point is that the support is fantastic, and I always had a really good experience.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to give my own little shameless plug at the end here. We are planning an unconference in Orlando, Florida. Right now, our target date is January 21st, 2022. We're going to welcome all platforms, and it's going to be an unconference. If you've been to the Mage unconference in Cologne, Germany, it's going to be in that format. It's super fun, limited size. We're going to have people vote. I went to the last one, and Shopware was there, and the two brothers who own Shopware were putting up topics. It was a fun time. It was it was like everybody was there to collaborate, and everybody was there to talk about it. Vinay talked about closure, which he seems to talk about all the time. It was just so much fun. So we're, if anybody knows, there's a thing called Disney World, I guess, or something in Orlando. I think there's one in LA too. Yeah. So we're really working on this. We're going to try to get it. We're going to get a website launched, and we're working with Firebear over in Germany, the same people that kind of put on that Mage conference. So that's my shameless plug.
No, and if it works out, I'll be happy to try and join. So
great. Well, Yoav, thank you again today. I appreciate you taking the time, and we're going to have to schedule a second one because there's so much more to talk about in Oro.
I have the link to your calendar. I'll just get on it.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Bye. The Talk Commerce podcast is sponsored by SwiftOtter. E-commerce developers solve problems daily. In fact, some of those seem like mountainous hurdles that must be climbed in a matter of hours. Stress levels can go through the roof. No wonder the plague of burnout affects developers too. But there's a vaccine for that. Investing time in your career will take you farther than you ever imagined. Meet SwiftOtter. SwiftOtter exists to help you become the e-commerce hero that is indispensable and irreplaceable at your company. We do this through Magento certification study materials and Joseph Maxwell's most recent book, The Art of E-commerce Debugging. Go to swiftotter.com to learn more about how you can quickly climb the ranks in your quest to be a better developer. While you're there, use the coupon code TALKCommerce for 15% off any digital goods at swiftotter.com. Cloud is a new normal for companies of any size. Buying, maintaining, upgrading, and disposing of machines is expensive and complicated. Amazon Web Services, managed by eWayCorp, offers an easy-to-use, flexible, cost-effective solution to all your infrastructure needs. eWayCorp can provide a secure, reliable, scalable, high-performance network that will make your office hum. Not literally. eWayCorp has saved its customers an average of 31% on their IT costs while adding 62% to the bottom line efficiency. To top that, their customers have seen 43% fewer security incidents. Go to ewaycorp.com to learn how you can start saving money and headaches by moving to the cloud. That's ewaycorp.com. Thank you again for listening. My name is Brent Peterson, and it has been my pleasure to be your host today. Please rate and subscribe to Talk Commerce. New shows out every week.